and welcome back to IASA Soundbytes. I'm Darren Reffitt, the Vice Chair of IASA's Education Committee and the Director of Product Marketing Excellence with Guidewire Software. And today I'm excited to be joined by John O'Leary, who is an author, coach, and speaker, and who will also be one of our keynotes later this summer at IASA Xchange in New Orleans. John's inspiring story began when he was 9 years old and was burned on 100% of his body. And in the face of death, told his mother, "Mom, I don't want to die, I want to live." Now, once expected to die, John teaches others how to live. He's the author of 2 #1 best-selling books, On Fire and In Awe, and he's the host of the Live Inspired podcast. John, thanks so much for joining us today.
Listen, this is really an honor, and I'm grateful for the time.
Wonderful. So, John, let me start with probably the thing that's on everyone's minds, waking and sleeping right now. We've gone through basically a plague over the last 14 months, and I don't know that everyone's really dealt with the trauma of what we've gone through. I know I haven't. As people look to the future, what do you think is going to happen as people start to deal with the after effects of what we've all gone through?
Well, I think one of the mistakes we sometimes make is to race into the new normal. You're already hearing it from people. They're talking about, man, I just can't wait to get back to normal, to get back to my old way of life, whether that's travel or the office is open or the schools are open again. And sometimes it's wise to breathe and to take a moment to understand what we've learned, what it meant, and how it can actually make us better going forward. One of the things we did early in this, you referred to it as a pandemic, this plague that we all endured. Everyone in our office received a journal with 2 words on it. The first was grace, and the second was excellence. And the idea of grace was like, give yourself permission to breathe a little bit, give yourself permission to do things differently than maybe you've done them in the past. But also that second word was important, like also excellence. Just because things are different, just because things are completely out of whack, or you're living in these uncharted territories and times, doesn't mean that we can't do exceptional things together. So grace and excellence was, I think, wise, sage advice for individuals within my office. But I also think that might all serve all of us going forward pretty effectively as well.
That is a great approach to having dealt with this. I don't know that every company kind of looked at it long-term like that, or looked how to keep everyone motivated, but I'm blessed that our company did. So, John, I guess my question would be, as people start to move into what you described as, and others are describing as, the new normal, what do you think is one thing that every person should be doing right now to try and figure out what that new normal is?
Oh, that's awesome. So when I hear you ask that question, I'm reminded of a lunch I had with my grandfather almost 20 years ago. It was like September 17th, 2001. And it was the day that the markets reopened after 9/11. So he and I are eating pasta together, and he shared with me over lunch that he made a significant investment in 2 stocks that day. The 2 stocks were Boeing. And by the way, I'm not giving buy recommendations on these 2 organizations. I'm just letting you know what my grandfather said 2 decades ago. He bought Boeing and American Airlines. On the day the markets were reopening, on the day that everybody knew, even this finance major who just graduated college, his grandson knew that the market was going to drop massively, and maybe no industry would be more affected than airlines. So I looked at him and I said, "Gramps, why would you do that? Why would you buy, put your money into those 2 organizations?" And his response, and I think this gets to your question, his response was, "Do you know why they call us the greatest generation, John?" And I said, "No." He said, "Well, it wasn't because we survived the Great Depression. That's not why. I think most of us would have tried to survive the Great Depression. It wasn't because we went off and we fought in the Great World War II. It wasn't just because we left our homes and our farms and we went overseas to fight another war. And it wasn't because when we came home, we built the most successful society in the history of the world." I guess a humble brag from Grandpa. He said, "So do you know what it was?" And I said, "No, what was it then?" He said, it's because as we did all of those things, we never forgot the lessons that those other things were teaching us along the way. We never forgot the lesson that the Great Depression taught us as a family, the power of faith, about coming together. As we served our nation, we never forgot about the power of showing up, facing evil head on, and showing up as your brothers and sisters keepers. We never forgot that lesson. And thirdly, John, we never forgot that we did not build that society just for ourselves, but we built it for our neighbors. We built it for generations to come. That is why they refer to us today as the greatest generation. Then he takes a bite of pasta. And I recognize maybe why he made that investment into airline stocks as the markets are opening up after 9/11. So you asked me, John, what can we learn going forward from this pandemic and from this wild ride that we've been on for the last 16, almost 17 months? I think sometimes the lessons from the past inform how we can show up and interact going forward. So leaders, servants, family members, friends, colleagues on the call who I've not yet rocked to sleep, I hope. What I would encourage all of you to do is to make a list of what you've learned about yourself, about what matters, maybe about what does not matter over the previous 16 months. What has COVID taught you? What has what we've been through as a nation and as nations over the previous year and a half taught you? What have you learned professionally? What have you learned matters in your family and in your faith and with your health and with the first responders and with everything else we've learned? My concern, and Darren, we talked about this at the beginning, is we might immediately pivot back into business as if nothing really changed. And maybe that would be the greatest mistake we could make throughout all of this, because things have changed. Now, the opportunity is that we can utilize those changes to make even better things going forward together.
You know, I think back on my grandparents and my mother having lived through the Great Depression and the way that impacted them. And for years, the things that they did that were just habit that formed during that time period. And I can understand better than ever, I think, how what they went through really caused their behaviors to shift for the rest of their lives. And I'm sure it's going to happen to me as well.
And I mean this with compassion, but I hope it does. And I hope it happens with me and my children. And we understand, you know, that we still want to climb the ladder, but we want to make sure it's leaning against the proper wall.
That's a great way. I was talking more about hoarding food, but I mean, yeah, we we can talk about that too.
Hey, both matter, man. Both are important conversations to have.
So let me ask you one more question. Some friends and I met recently, and we were talking about how, if nothing else, the pandemic has taught us, using someone else's analogy, and I don't even know where it came from, that there really are two different types of people. There are people who walk into the break room at work where there's free pizza and say, oh no, there might not be enough pizza for everyone. I'll only take one slice. And then there are people that walk in and say, oh no, there might not be enough pizza for everyone. I better take 3 slices so there's enough for me. And I think in the pandemic, the thing I've learned is that that's so true, and that people fall into one of those two buckets. Mm-hmm. And I'm not sure how that learning is going to help me in the future, but I'm hoping that we can get people to start thinking more as 1 slice people and less as 3 slice people.
Well, the lesson was taught to all of us, not so much with pizza back in March of 2020, but with toilet paper of all things. And so if you cover enough for your own little rear end, that ought to be enough. We don't need closets full of cotton just in case the world comes to an end. So like you, I hope we become much more the type of individuals that take 1 slice. That's enough. You know, like I am a climber. I love to make a difference and to grow the top line revenue or whatever else. But at the end of the day, what is enough? And I think if we ask that question honestly and we answer it honestly, we'll realize we already have it.
Absolutely. I'm right there with you. So John, if our audience would like to connect with you online, if they'd like to follow you on Twitter, what is the best way to find you?
Yeah, so, you know, we have a podcast. It's top rated. It's called Live Inspired with John O'Leary. We are on Twitter. It's all the social media handles, and you can grab all of those at johnolearyinspires.com. So again, the website's johnolearyinspires.com.
Great. Thank you so much. And thank you at home for joining us today. As always, we'd love for you to follow us on YouTube, comment. If you would like to follow me on Twitter, I'm at DMReffit. You can follow IASA at IASA Inc. And you can also email me at dreffit@guidewire.com. As I mentioned earlier, John will be joining us as a keynote on Monday during IASA Xchange in New Orleans. And we're really looking forward to hearing more from him. And thank you for joining us. And thank you, John, for joining us today.
Thank you, Darren.
Have a great day.